Some of the most valuable decisions I ever made didn't look like much at first. Same goes for people. Same goes for silence. And sometimes, even for storms. In this story, I'm going to tell you what happened when I decided not to leave. When I delayed a cross-country move, ignored the pressure to act fast, and stayed still just long enough for a letter to find me. A letter from a man I once trusted, a man I once lost, and a truth I could no longer avoid. So pour yourself a cup of coffee, take a deep breath, and settle in. Because this isn't just a story about timing. It's about control, forgiveness, legacy, and why some debts can't be paid with money. And if you learn to listen closely, you might just find the skill that saved my life could change yours too. It used to take an explosion to make me stop. Now, just the wind changing direction is enough. I was standing barefoot on the porch of my cabin, coffee in hand, watching the sky draw long silver lines over the ocean. That quiet before a storm, not loud, not theatrical, just still. And if you've lived long enough, you know stillness can scream louder than thunder. The waves didn't care about my schedule. Neither did the wind. And for the first time in a long time, neither did I. But that didn't happen overnight. You see, I wasn't always like this. A man who chooses silence over speed. There was a time when I would have been halfway to Kentucky by now, racing weather systems and gut instincts with a caravan of trailers, dogs, and half-packed dreams in tow. But today, I chose something different. Not because I'm old, but because I'm finally wise enough. And ironically, that wisdom came not from markets or money, but from watching my wife exhale. Let me explain. It started 2 nights ago. I had just posted a video on my secondary channel, one where I speak a little more freely about faith, morality, and the intersections between money and meaning. I spoke about a topic that, to me, was as clear as the shoreline at low tide. No gray area, just truth. And then the comments came in. At first, I let them roll. You learn to ignore noise after managing billion-dollar portfolios and dodging egos sharper than hedge fund spikes. But this wasn't noise. This was poison disguised as doctrine. Misinterpretations, cherry-picked scripture, sanctimony in capital letters. I responded to a few, calmly, rationally. Then I responded again, a little less calmly. Then I blocked 7 people in under 5 minutes. And somewhere in between, I felt my pulse rising, not from anger, but from familiarity. This was the old rhythm, the old rush. And just like that, I wasn't on the porch anymore. I was in a boardroom again, arguing valuation metrics with a kid half my age, or negotiating exits while silently praying for peace. That version of me, sharp, relentless, respected, had never learned how to pause. But I've paid for that man, in ways most people wouldn't understand. By morning, the tension had bloomed. Not on my face. I'm better at hiding it now. But my wife saw it. She always does. She didn't say much. Just moved a little slower, talked a little softer. And I realized something I never wanted to admit. When I'm off balance, even slightly, she starts bracing for a storm that may never come, because she remembers when they did. It's not the screaming that breaks people. It's the memories of the days when you couldn't stop. So I did something I rarely did in my younger years. I told her I wasn't okay. Then I told her I was going to get okay. Alone. And that's how I ended up barefoot, on this porch, in the middle of a snow-threatened morning, watching the horizon like it held the answers. We were supposed to leave today. The plan was simple. Hit the road early, drive straight through the front end of a winter system, and be halfway across the country by nightfall. But the trailers weren't packed. The vet paperwork for the horses hadn't come back. The roads were icing up. And Kansas City, our exact path, was getting slammed by a record-breaking storm. The younger me, he would have gone anyway. But today, I chose not to gamble with nature. You can day trade stocks. You can short sell volatility, but you can't out-negotiate an ice storm. and you sure as hell can't outrun regret. So I looked at my wife, smiled gently, and said, "We're not going anywhere today. Not because I couldn't force it, but because I no longer needed to." Now here's the thing they don't tell you when you retire. The habits don't leave. The schedule in your blood doesn't just disappear. Even when you live by the ocean, surrounded by silence, your mind still runs quarterly reports on time, control, expectation, and outcome. So when life throws a wrench, your old programming kicks in. Fix it. Push through. Prove you're still sharp, still strong, still in command. But here's the question I've learned to ask. What if the real strength is knowing when not to act? I sat on the bench outside my shed, a makeshift tack room now turned into a quiet corner of thought. I brewed a cup of strong black coffee from Juniper Mountain beans I had traded with a local down the road, lit a cigar I'd been saving for no reason at all, and I waited. Not for the weather to change, not for the paperwork to arrive. I waited for my thoughts to slow down. Because this, right here, was the new protocol. Not reaction, reflection. You know, in business, we talk a lot about ROI, return on investment. But no one teaches you about ROL, return on logic. Logic isn't loud. It doesn't scream, "Go now," or "prove them wrong." It whispers, "Sit, think, breathe." That kind of logic saved me more times than I can count. It saved deals, saved relationships, saved me from myself. And now, it was saving this day. But logic alone doesn't stop the world from pressing in. Therefore, I needed more than logic. I needed a new story lens, one that didn't rely on outcomes, but on intention. So I turned off my phone. Not because I couldn't answer, but because not every voice deserves a reply. And I looked out toward the ocean, where a wave broke just as the wind shifted. And I thought, if I go today, I risk everything: safety, peace, trust, just to satisfy a timeline that nobody truly cares about. But if I stay, maybe I teach someone watching that it's okay to wait. So here we are. Me, the wind, the surf, and a day that didn't go as planned, but might just go exactly as it needed to. And tomorrow? Well, if the road's clear, maybe we'll leave. And if they don't, we'll brew another cup of coffee. We'll repack a trailer or two, and we'll wait. Because sometimes the best trade you'll ever make is urgency for peace. But just as I was finishing my cigar, Jonah, my wife's son, the boy with fire in his gut, walked into the shed with a look I hadn't seen before. "There's something we need to talk about," he said, eyes steady. And right then I knew. The storm wasn't just outside anymore. It wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't say. That's how you know someone's about to test your peace. Jonah stood there, halfway inside the doorway, one boot still wet with beach sand, the other tapping gently against the wooden floor like a metronome with something to prove. His eyes held that specific fire, the one I used to see in mirrors, in boardrooms, in rear-view regrets. He cleared his throat, but not because he needed to speak. He needed me to know something was coming. "We're losing time," he said finally. "The longer we wait, the worse it gets. You know that, right?" I looked at him, not through him, not past him, at him. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. And there's a big difference between knowing the facts and understanding the truth. "Sit down," I said, motioning to the opposite chair. He hesitated. Because men like him, like I used to be, don't sit when they want to move. Jonah's about 32, smart, solid, built like a linebacker and wired like a hedge fund algorithm. Married my daughter 3 years ago. She sees in him the same ambition she once admired in me, but I pray she never sees the same storm. He works in logistics now, operations manager for a distribution company that thinks urgent is a virtue. And ever since he arrived here to help with the move, he's been fighting an invisible clock. Not his watch, his instinct. He's good, loyal, a man of action, but he hasn't learned the difference between urgency and importance. And that's a distinction life will make for you, one way or another. "Everything's ready," he said. "We're just dragging this out now. If we leave tonight, we could beat the front. It's doable." I let the silence hang between us like a negotiation waiting for a number. "Doable," I echoed. "Yeah, I've checked the forecasts. I've mapped out 3 alternate routes. If we leave in the next 2 hours, we can be through Missouri by sunrise. And if we hit black ice, if the horses start stressing, if we get stuck halfway with 2 trailers and no visibility?" He didn't answer right away, just shrugged. The kind of shrug that means, that's the risk, that's life. And that's when I saw it. Jonah wasn't trying to prove me wrong. He was trying to prove himself right. I used to chase outcomes like that. Had entire years of my life dictated by momentum, not meaning. I'd make $5 million on a trade and lose a piece of my soul on the same day. Because the market, like life, doesn't reward truth. It rewards timing. And so I told him a story I'd never shared before. "There was a time," I began, "when I closed a $480 million acquisition while my wife sat in a hospital bed, waiting for me to show up." He blinked. That got his attention. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were always heavy trading days back then. Volatility spikes, news dumps, that kind of thing. I had a choice, leave the office or stay for the closing call. I stayed. I looked at him, then past him, into the shifting light beyond the shed. I made the deal, and we made headlines. But when I got to the hospital, the baby didn't make it. My son. His breath caught. I didn't say it for impact. I said it for truth. She never blamed me, not out loud, but she didn't need to. I did it enough for both of us. Jonah sat back in the chair. Sometimes stories don't teach. They just open. He didn't speak for a long while, and I didn't press him. I could feel the tension in him coil and uncoil like a spring learning stillness. And then, finally, "What would you have done differently?" he asked. I smiled. Left the deal, lost the money, been there for her. But then the firm would have survived, or collapsed, but we'd still be whole. This is what they don't write in finance books. Sometimes, what you gain will cost more than what you lose. And by the time you realize it, you've already spent everything that mattered. That evening, we walked along the beach. The storm hadn't hit yet, but the air smelled like memory. The tide was further in than usual, eating up the shoreline like time swallows plans. Jonah asked if I was still planning to go. "Not today," I said. "Maybe not tomorrow either." He didn't push. And for the first time I saw in his eyes not resistance, but restraint. That was the first reviravolta. But the day wasn't done with us yet. Later that night, just as I was locking up the shed, my phone buzzed. Not a comment notification, not a call, but a news alert. A 40-car pileup on the exact interstate Jonah had mapped. Black ice, fatalities, delays for days. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just walked outside, took a deep breath of salt and wind, and let the weight of almost sink in. But life doesn't let you win that easily. Therefore, as I turned to go inside, I found my wife standing there, holding a letter in her hand. A real letter. Stamped. Addressed. From someone I hadn't heard from in over 20 years. She handed it to me without a word. The handwriting was unmistakable, and I felt the ground shift, not from the weather, but from the past. "You okay?" she asked gently. I wasn't sure, because some storms don't come from the sky. Some debts don't live on paper. They live in silence, and eventually, they call to be settled. I held the envelope like it might detonate in my hand. It had no return address, no logo, no hint of intent. But the handwriting? That shook me more than any market crash ever had. It was from Marcus, the man I once trusted more than my own instincts. The man who built half the empire with me, and then tried to burn the rest when he walked away. I hadn't spoken to him in over 2 decades. The last time I saw his face, it was across a courtroom, not as an enemy. Worse, as a former friend who chose ambition over allegiance. I took the letter inside. My wife didn't ask questions. She knew I'd share when I was ready. That's her gift. She listens even when I say nothing. Jonah was already asleep, probably exhausted from wrestling with himself more than with me. I sat at the old writing desk, lit only by a salt-stained lantern and the last flicker of resolve. Then I opened the envelope. It wasn't long, just a few lines, handwritten, raw and uneven. I heard you disappeared. I heard the silence in your success. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for what I didn't do. There's something you need to know. I'm dying. I didn't reach out to clear my name. I reached out because you're the only one who still remembers how it really happened, and you're the only one who can finish what we started. If you're still the man I knew, come see me. There was no signature, just an address in Montana, remote. Remote enough that if I went, it wouldn't be just a visit. It would be a reckoning. I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, but from knowing that the storm we avoided on the road had circled back through memory. Because here's the truth no one prepares you for. You can survive Wall Street. You can survive betrayal. You can even survive losing your child. But you can't outrun what you owe to your own soul. In the morning, the ocean was wild. The tide slammed against the rocks like a judge pounding a gavel. And I knew something had shifted. I told my wife about the letter. She didn't flinch, just poured me coffee, sat across from me and said, "Will you go?" "I don't know," I said. But I did know. Not because of Marcus, because of me. Because if I didn't go, if I didn't face this, then everything I'd built out here, every moment of peace I claimed to live, would be a lie. Jonah found me later, sitting on the beach alone. The weather had calmed, but something in the air still felt heavy. "I heard," he said. I nodded. "Are you going?" he asked. "Not yet, but I will." "What about the move?" "It can wait." He looked confused, not angry, not disappointed, just unsure. That made two of us. But then he said something that caught me off guard. "I've always thought you were the kind of man who left the past behind." I looked at him and replied, "I am. But sometimes, to truly leave it behind, you have to walk straight through it first." That evening, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old portfolio binder from the office I never planned to rebuild. Inside were records of the first fund Marcus and I ever launched. Back when we still believed we could outthink the system without becoming it. Page after page of dreams, projections, notes in the margins, and right in the center, a photo. Us, standing side by side, grinning like fools in suits too expensive for our wisdom. Behind us, the city skyline. Ahead of us, a storm we didn't see coming. But this story wasn't about Marcus anymore. Therefore, I had to ask a harder question. What unfinished part of me needed this closure? And the answer came not in memory, but in motion. Because when you live by the ocean, you learn something powerful. The tide doesn't ask if you're ready. It comes anyway. And you either stand still, or you move with it. So I made a decision. I'd go to Montana, not tomorrow, not in panic. But after the trailers were packed, the house was settled, and my wife was at peace with the plan. I'd go as a man with nothing left to prove, only something left to redeem. That night I sat by the fire, not for warmth, for grounding. I thought about Marcus. I thought about my son. I thought about the weight of ambition and the cost of delay. And I realized the very things that once made me rich are the same things that almost made me empty. Foreshadowing. In the morning, Jonah approached with an idea. "What if I drive the trailers to Kentucky with Mom? And you go straight to Montana?" I looked at him. The kid was growing before my eyes. "I'm not just trying to help," he said. "I think this is something you need to do alone." He was right. And yet, The idea of not being there to oversee everything made something old twitch inside me. Not fear, control. And for the first time in years, I let it go. I walked to the porch. The same one where this all started. The wind had shifted again, not strong, not cold, just different. And I knew. This story wasn't about a man who stayed. It was about a man who finally knew when to go. It used to take an explosion to make me stop. Now, just the wind changing direction is enough. That was how this story began. But endings, they rewrite beginnings. Because when I finally left for Montana, it wasn't with urgency. It was with reverence. Not for Marcus, not even for the past, but for the man I had become, and the one I still had a chance to meet. The drive was long in the way that strips away pretense. No podcasts, no news, just silence. I took the old truck, not the new one. Brought one bag, no watch. Every few hours I pulled over, stepped outside, and let the cold remind me I'm still alive, and I'm not in a hurry anymore. When I finally arrived, it wasn't a mansion, it wasn't a cabin either. Just a modest house tucked between frozen pine trees and regrets. Marcus was thinner than I remembered, his hair gone, his skin almost translucent under the weight of time and truth, but his eyes, still sharp, still aware, like he'd been waiting for this moment, not just with hope, but with discipline. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "Neither was I answered. He smiled, not as a victor, as a man who knows he doesn't have many more smiles left. We talked, for hours, no scripts, no defenses. He told me things I never knew, like how he tried to back out of the deal that betrayed me, but had already been outvoted. Like how he sent the letter not because he needed forgiveness, but because he couldn't leave without truth. And then he said something I'll never forget. The money never haunted me. The silence did. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no handshake that healed decades. But there was something better. Clarity. And clarity, like compound interest, grows over time if you let it. Before I left, he handed me a notebook. Old, faded. Inside, scribbles of ideas we had once dreamed up together. Startups, ventures, impact funds that never got launched because we got too busy chasing valuation instead of vision. At the back of the notebook was a note in his handwriting. "You always said the world needed slower money. Maybe now's the time." I didn't answer. Some answers live better in action. When I returned to the beach house, it was late evening. The sky was painted in those impossible colors the ocean only gives you when you've been gone long enough to miss them. My wife met me at the porch. No questions, just an embrace. And that embrace, it said everything. Jonah had already moved everything to Kentucky. Smooth, clean, no accidents. He left me a note on the fridge. The storm passed. So did the need to control everything. Guess I'm learning. Jay. I smiled. That night, I took the notebook from Marcus and sat on the sand. Waves rolled in with rhythm. The moon hung low. The wind, soft, curious, danced through my hair like a memory I didn't want to forget. And I knew this story wasn't about Marcus. It wasn't about moving. It wasn't even about the storm. It was about surrender. In the world I came from, surrender was weakness. But here, in this place, at this time, it was power. Because surrender, when chosen, is not defeat. It's direction. I looked out over the ocean and whispered words I hadn't said in years. Just do your best and leave the rest. It wasn't from me. It was from a vinyl record I listened to as a child. Black Beauty, the voice said. And somehow, it still held. So here's the part they won't teach you in business school. You'll make deals. You'll build things. You'll win. But unless you learn when to pause, when to feel, when to walk toward what hurts instead of away from it, you'll never really be rich. You'll just be busy. As the fire outside faded and the waves fell into sleep, I closed the notebook. There would be no launch of a new fund. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, there would be something else. A series, a message, a final act that didn't shout, but whispered. You don't have to run. You just have to know when to stop. And that, my friend, is what I came here to say. Not everything that's urgent is important. And not every move forward is progress. It used to take an explosion to make me stop. Now, just the wind changing direction is enough. And that's how I know. I'm finally free. If you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. I don't take that lightly. Time's the one thing you never get back. So if you gave me yours today, I hope I gave you something worth keeping. We don't always know which words stick, or which moments hit home. But if something in this story made you pause, reflect, or maybe just breathe a little slower, then it did its job. Take care of yourself. Take care of who's waiting for you at home. And remember, not every debt is about dollars. And not every move forward means you're going the right direction. See you next time.